So here I am wiring up the wasted spark coil on plug setup, pretty much VVTi coil on plug. So in this case I end up having one plug per 2 cylinders, and in order for to make this work, as you can see right there, I've got a VVTi igniter. I also got the old igniter sitting next to it just so I know which wires go to what. So it's just a tedious job of just going through wire by wire and making sure that you connect it to the right thing. Just so you can get it right. So it was just something that took a little bit of time, a little bit of attention to detail, but it came together. It's come together real nice, and it'll definitely make the car, run better under boost. I know that there's always issues with those distributors that sometimes the spark isn't strong enough, and I just want to do everything I could to avoid that. Again, I mentioned this when I wired up the injectors on the car. I tend to like using the crimp connectors in order to do that. Some people like to do the soldering. I think it's just really a personal preference. I've never had any issues with the crimping, so as you can see, I'm using it as I go through, and I make sure that I loom everything up so everything is nice and tight and protected, and try to make it look as clean as I can. I'm not trying to do a wire tuck or anything, but just want to keep things looking pretty nice. Wired up the ignition coils. I ended up using the old igniter to get the little tabs off there. So then I could come with the new igniter and get all the corresponding tabs. Over here, instructions, I printed them off of one of the Lexus websites. And what I did is when I wired the coils, I made sure I wrote down which coil was which color, so that when I wired them up, I knew where everything went. So that's going good. And here's a closer shot of the diagram I used in order to do the coil on plug setup on my car. Alright, so got the transmission cooler, got the oil cooler in, got the oil cooler lines. Right now they're just loosely put on there. Also starting to look at the intercooler, see how I'm going to make that fit. So, but yeah, definitely coming along pretty good. Alright, so I'm in here test fitting all the different parts. There's still a couple things I gotta do. I'm probably gonna take some stuff out after I get everything test fit. But ended up getting the 2-row radiator in. Did just the shroud ended up being all cracked and coming apart. And just in an effort to save some money, I'm gonna just duct tape it up to hold it together, and then down the road I'll end up getting a new shroud, because those things are pretty pricey right now. The only thing I'm worried about with this radiator is it sits about a ½ an inch higher than the stock radiator, so I'm hoping it'll still clear the trunk. But also got the intercooler kind of fit in there right now, as well as this radiator hose over here, because what I'm going to do is I'm going to start putting together the intercooler piping. I'm doing a side feed where it feeds from both from the same side intercooler, and I've got all this space in here to work with to get this intercooler piping working. And over here, got a universal intercooler kit that I'll be using to cut and put pieces together, and hopefully get a good routing for all this radiator. For this intercooler stuff. All right.
So I got my intercooler routing all figured out. I'm pretty stoked about it. So I've got it coming off of here, coming down. Got the blow-off valve down here. I'll twist and turn it to get it just right. And I'll be able to run my vacuum lines off of it. Comes down, goes right behind the headlight. Headlight can stay in the stock place. Everything fits perfect. Comes down, and here hits the intercooler. I want the same side intercooler. Comes back out, goes in. Have this for extra cooling. I mean, we'll see what it is. It might just be a gimmick, but hey, it's something. And it's here in the wheel well, and it'll come right up, and it'll hit the turbo, which is right down in here. And then it connects to the turbo with a little 90 in there. So yeah, it all fits just the way I want. Had the fabricator put a lip on the inside of every single connection. I'm not planning on using these couplers. Actually, I'm going all black with the couplers, but these were some old ones I had laying around, so I can get these ones all dirty, kind of trying to figure out what to how to route this stuff, and then use the real deal ones when it's time to go. So also too, if you notice here, I got this little piece right here. The reason why I have this little piece right here is I was up in the air if I wanted to put the factory MAF back on or not. Instead, what I'm going to do is I have an intake air temperature sensor. I'm going to tap it into here, and then I'll run these two wires to the ECU, and I'll have my intake air temps, and it'll be just coming right before it hits the intake, which will be great. And then also too, what I'm planning on mounting somewhere is this guy right here, which is a map sensor. There's a built-in map sensor on the MS3 Pro Evo, but I want to go ahead and have a second one so I can run one for barometric pressure and one for my actual boost pressure. Find somewhere to mount this guy. I'm still trying to figure that out. I'm thinking what I may have to do is I may have to mount it somewhere over on the other side, and then just run the lines all the way back over to here where the wiring goes into the firewall. Because I do already have a loom that I can use, a custom loom that I put in for all my other stuff that I'm running as well. So things are coming along pretty good there. Also too, need to figure out a place for this guy, my catch can. A little unsure where I'm gonna put it, figure out something. Gotta get it mounted somewhere in here where it'll be nice and out of the way, but the trunk will still close. So we'll see what I can do with that. Hopefully I can figure something out. So I'm getting really, really close to the first start on this car. Talk to you guys later.
So here we go, all the black intercooler piping is all in, the couplers are all hooked up. It's looking real good, getting really good, nice and close to being done. Oh, I just can't wait. I cannot wait to start this car. So you can see I had everything all cleaned up, tried to keep everything looking as good as possible. Got my vacuum line running off the blow-off valve. Still got to do that wiring. It's a mess, but I've got kind of an organization with the colors, and I've labeled everything, so I'll be getting to that at some point. So if you can see down there, also got the intercooler mounted. All the pipes running where they need to run. Everything's looking real good. Ended up having to mount the intercooler to the back of the crash bar. Had those two little metal kind of brackets I created in order to do that. Back inside, got the transmission cooler. It's mounted to the condenser. And then I got the oil cooler sitting right there in front of it. So gonna get the cooling I need both for both those units, so I don't have to worry about any heat issues. Now I had two different valve covers I wanted to use. I have this one that's in all black, then I have the see-through. I think I ended up going with the see-through. I really like it. So just as a safety precaution, I went ahead and replaced the seals in the power steering pump, because last thing I want to do is fill up this power steering pump and then just have it just dump all on the floor when I try to start it up. So here's me pulling it out. And right here, I ended up just setting up a spot on my floor. and went ahead and pulled apart the power steering pump. You can see I just got a nice little AutoZone power steering pump seal kit. So I'll go through, remove all the seals, put the new ones in, seal it back up, put it back on the car. Wasn't too hard to do. Only took maybe about 30-40 minutes to actually go through and do this job. Probably the hardest part was just getting the serpentine belt off. So now here we go, putting the power steering pump back on the car. Real simple. Like I said, hardest part is probably the serpentine belt. A couple bolts, comes right back in. And here we go, putting the drive shaft back in, sliding it back under the car. Not too difficult to do. Best thing to do though is with those bolts that you have to screw into the differential. I ended up using some blue Loctite on those. Last thing I want to do is for those to jiggle out in the middle of a nice pool or while I'm driving, and next thing you know my drive shaft comes out, and that ended up being a really bad day. So make sure you do that and you'll be all set. So here's a shot of the axles I got. I ended up putting some new axles in. Just got them from AutoZone. Nothing too big, nothing too major. And then here's where I put them into the rear calipers or into the rear discs. You end up having to throw a caliper or a cotter pin in there to make sure that it stays in there nice and tight. And now here I am under the car, and as you can see, you got the drive shaft bolts in right there. So got it all nice and tight in there. Like I said, use some blue Loctite for that. Slides right into the transmission. There's those two bolts right there. You got to make sure you get those bolts in as well. They hook into the body of the car. And then right up here are all the bolts that mount the tranny mount to the chassis. So you got two bolts there, and then two bolts on the other side, as well as four in the middle that actually hook the mount directly to the tranny. And as you can see, I put a new tranny mount in too. Again, if I'm going to be dropping the tranny, I might as well do it right. And then right here, also ran some new oil cooler lines all the way out to that new oil cooler I have sitting on the front of the car. Original oil cooler, or at least transmission cooler on the car, it's built into the radiator. Well, since I went with the 2-row radiator, it doesn't have that, so that's why I have a standalone transmission cooler, which is actually good because it gives a little bit more cooling. So ended up getting all that done.